This is a Hog Sports Network podcast. You're listening to the Whole Hog Football Podcast, bringing you the latest news, analysis, and more. Here's your host, Matt Jones, with Scotty Bordelon of the Hog Sports Network and WholeHogSports.com.
Almost time for the Southwest Classic, Arkansas and Texas A&M on Saturday at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. The second to last time, the penultimate Southwest Classic between Arkansas and Texas A&M. They'll continue to play, obviously, after next year, but they're not going to play in Arlington anymore after 2024. The writing is on the wall for that one. This neutral site series, it began in 2009. It's moved off campus a few times since then for various reasons, but it's coming to an end after next year. And for this game, it feels like who the teams have available might be the biggest story going in. For Arkansas, Rocket Sanders might be back in the fold this week. We don't know for sure. We know that he looked good at practice earlier this week. It's all going to be about how he continues to recover and heal from this knee injury that's kept him out for 3 consecutive games since the season opener. And for Texas A&M, Connor Wegman, their starting quarterback, he's out for the season. Foot injury suffered against Auburn last week. In steps Max Johnson, very similar to last year when Johnson came in for the injured Hayes King and led A&M to a 23-21 win over Arkansas down in Arlington. This is going to be the third year in a row that Max Johnson's going to start a game against Arkansas. Kind of hard to believe. He was the starter at LSU in 2021, played really poorly in Arkansas's win at Death Valley that year, got pulled in the second half for Garrett Nussmeier, the backup quarterback. Obviously played against them last year in Arlington, and this year he'll be the starter for A&M moving forward. He gave A&M a spark at the end of last week's game against Auburn. They win 27-10. Their offense wasn't looking very good up until Johnson came in. He threw a couple of second half touchdowns, including one to his brother. I think that was the first time that that's ever happened in the SEC, that a brother threw a touchdown pass to another brother. But that's who's going to start for A&M on Saturday. And so Arkansas's got a lot of game film on Max Johnson to look over. I'm Matt Jones with Scotty Bordelon and Ethan Westerman. And Scotty, let's start with you. Your thoughts on seeing Max Johnson again. And you know, this is a quarterback that I guess Arkansas knows a lot about from an individual standpoint, but you're looking at him now. This is 3 straight years and 3 different offenses that they're going to play him. They've never seen him in Bobby Petrino's system.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's for sure. And Arkansas's defensive coordinator didn't face him last year. So that's maybe have a brand new blueprint on how you want to go about getting after him. But yeah, the similarities for last year and this year again with Max Johnson are pretty crazy. He's fallen in line to get the bulk of the snaps after the guy that, beat him out in fall camp gets injured. It's pretty wild. I know Landon Jackson said on Tuesday that he played at LSU with Max Johnson, so he's excited to play him too. It's just kind of wild how college career paths kind of take shape. I don't imagine Landon ever thought that he'd face Max Johnson twice at a different school. When they were playing together at LSU, but one thing that Landon said, and then Sam Pittman said it too, I think Arkansas has got to be really aware of, Max Johnson's ability to create plays with his feet. And I think you made a good addition to our keys the other day or today. Sam said they like to roll him out and naked bootlegs and just kind of roll him out of the pocket. I think Arkansas has got to be leery of that, and they've got to be leery of, the tuck and run for him. I think you wrote that, he ran for 60 yards last year when you take out sack yardage.
Yeah, when adjusted for sacks, 60 yards on 10 carries last year. And he could have had more than that. His longest run was an 18-yard run. It was actually a 33-yard run, and Moose Muhammad had a block in the back late in that play that made it an 18-yard run. So really, he ran for even more yards than that.
Yeah, I think some of that can offset maybe some. I don't know if you want to call them deficiencies throwing the ball, but from what I can tell stats wise, he kind of seems like a low risk game manager type guy. Like I think he's got 7 picks in his career, over 600 pass attempts. So he's not going to put the ball in jeopardy all that much. But yeah, I think Arkansas's linebackers and maybe even like a Snacks Johnson type, they've got to be at that nickel spot. They've got to be aware of him, pulling the ball down and running, because if he picks up a first down with his feet, I think that's just kind of icing on the cake for A&M's offense.
Rocket Sanders potentially being back for Arkansas this week. I know you both have had eyes on him at practice. What have you thought as you've seen him? And I guess this has kind of been the game that has been targeted. I mean, I think they've had hopes that maybe he could come back for BYU, maybe he could come back for LSU last week. But I think as you've listened to Pittman talk about this over the course of the last couple 3 weeks, it feels like A&M has kind of been the game that they've really been targeting to have him back.
Yeah, Scotty and I agreed earlier this week after watching one of the practices that it looks like he's pretty much ready to go. I mean, just from what we've seen, if there's anything else holding him back, it's just really not apparent right now. But we even noticed that, going through some of these drills where he was getting hit with pads, it was almost like they were having the support staff hitting him with the foam pads to hit him a little harder than everybody else. It's almost like at this point, just kind of trying to get him ready for, that mindset that you're getting back into a game. He's looked good though. I thought he looked pretty shifty earlier this week in some of the drills that they were doing. So, honestly, Scotty, correct me if you think differently, but I mean, if I didn't know he wasn't injured, prior to watching some of these practices, I would have never guessed that he wasn't at, full speed.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. There was one drill that he was going through. They took a handoff and kind of went horizontal, vertical again, kind of around some pads that were on the ground, and then they have to go through like this light steel frame. The bar, I think the top bar is probably 4 feet off the ground, so it's kind of simulating. I think what Jimmy Smith wants them to do is kind of simulate running through the line of scrimmage, kind of where all the massive bodies are, kind of keep a low center of gravity. And then once you run through that bar, they had a support staffer. I think it was on Tuesday. He was throwing like this handheld blocking pad at the guys as they were coming through that steel frame, and Rocket hit a spin move in one of his reps, and Jimmy Smith loved it. I mean, it kind of looked like Rocket being Rocket again. I mean, we haven't obviously seen that at all the last, 3 weeks or so. He did look back to himself, and I would agree with Ethan. Like if a non-affiliated Arkansas person, or like if a person that wasn't affiliated with Arkansas was to go watch that practice, I don't think they would have known that he'd been banged up for a bit.
The Petrino angle in this thing, I think, is kind of interesting because he's such a great play caller, and he showed that last year when Missouri State came to Fayetteville. They had such a great plan to attack Arkansas during that game. Correct me, did they have a left-handed quarterback from Missouri State last year? Am I remembering that right?
Oh man, I could
I
not remember. I know it was a Shelley.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it was
remember it being Shelley. I just can't remember
Jason
if he was,
Shelley.
can't remember if he was left-handed or not. But Johnson's left-handed, and it, I think it. I may be totally off base here. I think it can be a little bit. Uh, I think it can be a little bit weird for defensive players to play a left-handed quarterback. I think there might be a little bit of an acclimation process to just seeing that, because it's just so unnatural. I feel like from a quarterback position to see quarterbacks, they're basically rolling the way that you think that you're not accustomed to seeing it. I don't know if that's an acclimation process or not. That's a total aside thought. But going back to Petrino, he's so skilled at getting those receivers on the crossing patterns, and I feel like that's going to be such a big deal for the Razorbacks this week. I feel like it's a big week for your cornerbacks, your nickel backs, your linebackers that are dropping back into pass coverage. I feel like A&M is going to put a lot of pressure on Arkansas, especially right there over the middle of the field between the hash marks, to defend that pass, because I don't know that they are going to see a team that challenges them maybe in the way that A&M will do.
Yeah, and A&M, like you said, it's kind of unconventional watching Max Johnson throw the ball, just because, especially rolling out of the pocket and throwing left-handed, that he threw a dart last week to Evan Stewart. Like, I want to say it was like his fourth or fifth pass of the game, maybe even his third. I mean, I think it throws off a viewer. I don't know if it throws off the defense, um, but he hit Stewart on that strike, and Stewart, he was, one of the highest rated recruits last year, 5-star in that big class that was all heralded for A&M. He's looked really good earlier through all of his games this year, he had back-to-back 100-yard games to start the year in their wins against New Mexico and Miami. And then, you know, last week, that touchdown pass between Johnson and Stewart, I think just, anytime your starting quarterback goes out, you're kind of holding your breath like, can we keep this up? Can we continue what we were doing with the starter? And I think that just kind of probably gave a big sigh of relief throughout the whole stadium seeing Max Johnson come in and make a play like that. But he's got some weapons, like you said. He's got Evan Stewart, Anais Smith, who I told Scotty earlier this week. I feel like he's been playing for Texas A&M since I was in the third grade.
Yeah, that's a fact. He's been a part of the Southwest Classic since it started.
I mean, he's dynamic. I think he's got 31 consecutive games that he's had a catch in, which that just shows a level of consistency. And he's had so many different quarterbacks as well. I mean, Texas A&M just seems to have a perpetual problem of can't keep a quarterback healthy unless it's Kellen Mond. He's stayed pretty healthy. Because Max Johnson, he's had injury problems in the past. Haynes King has had injury problems. Even going back to Nick Starkel, I think he got injured there. But Anais Smith is kind of that steady guy who's been there for all these different quarterbacks. And he's really dynamic in the return game too. But yeah, they definitely have weapons. They have another receiver, Jade Walker. He's third on the team, 148 receiving yards. And Noah Thomas has 4 touchdown catches for him. So they have a lot of different weapons, a lot of different guys that the Razorbacks definitely got to cover up.
Yeah, I think Anais Smith got a pass from Ryan Tannehill in Arkansas. I'm kidding. He did. By the way, Jason Shelley, he was right-handed, not left-handed. Smith he just feels like he's been kind of a Razorback killer in this game. I mean, I'm looking through his game by game against Arkansas. 2019, when he was a true freshman, 5 catches, 80 yards, a touchdown. He had a big game in 2020 against Arkansas. I think it was 6 catches for 67 yards. Had a big catch 2 years ago, but Arkansas kind of limited him in that game. And then last year he gets injured in the game against Arkansas and he's out for the year. I think he might have torn his ACL in that game against the Razorbacks last year. And so I don't know, it just feels like, it's like there's certain players who get up for certain games for whatever reason. It feels like Anais Smith gets up for this Arkansas game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's crazy that he's still in school to me. Like he's been productive his pretty much his entire career. I think him and Evan Stewart, those are 2 guys. Obviously, if you look at A&M's numbers, like they're averaging, over 11 catches a game. I think over 170 yards a game. One of them's got 3 touchdowns. I don't think the other one has one yet. But that doesn't make the guy with no touchdowns, that doesn't make him any less dangerous. Would imagine Bobby Petrino is probably going to dial up some opportunities for what his thing is, feed the studs, right? So those 2 guys are his guys that you want to get the ball to most often. But I would imagine that Petrino has watched enough film on Arkansas to be able to like pinpoint weaknesses or holes that Arkansas's got. I think it's covering in the flats. I think that's a no-brainer. I think we saw a little bit of that with Missouri State last year. Matt, you mentioned like those drag routes and the crossing patterns and stuff like that. He made me love that on the NCAA football video games. Like that's my favorite route. It's my favorite routes to run. But he's always really good at those. And I would not be surprised given, kind of I went back and looked through some of Max Johnson's PFF numbers. It was either last year when Arkansas faced him or against Auburn, but he likes that short kind of intermediate throw over the middle. I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas tries to take advantage over the middle of the field and then, try to keep Arkansas a little bit on their toes with throws into the flat, make their linebackers run to the sideline and try to make plays in space. I think that's what Bobby's all about. It's just trying to make defenders miss in space. Like I think my guy can beat your guy. So let's see if we can do it. And I'm not going to be surprised at all if he takes some shots with Anais Smith and Evan Stewart too. Even though Max Johnson, he doesn't really take that many shots downfield, but you might see him loosen up a little bit in this one.
Some of the players who I knew who played for him at Arkansas were always so in awe, I think, almost of the level of preparation that he had. I mean, they would talk about he had these plays that they would call scoring plays or I think this is how it's told to me. This has been so long ago, but basically it was like, we're going to score on this play. And so many times it actually worked, and it's like they knew that this guy was going to do this and you're going to do this to counter it and you're going to go score a touchdown because of it. From a preparation standpoint, I don't think it gets a lot better than Petrino, at least not at the college game. Arkansas's defense has got to play better this week. I mean, you look back at the LSU game, and the more you think about that game, I think the more uh, just the less you really think about Arkansas's defensive performance. LSU scored on its final 6 drives. Arkansas didn't make a stop in the LSU game after about the 13-minute mark of the second quarter. That was when McGlothern intercepted Jaden Daniels. Jefferson throws an interception right back to LSU. They go down, kick a field goal, and then from that point, it's touchdown, 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 game-ending field goal to win 34-31. I don't know if that's a byproduct of playing what's going to be one of the best offenses they play all year in LSU. I don't think there's any doubt about that LSU is one of the more prolific offenses in the SEC, or if it's a deal where, okay, now you've looked good against these teams that you ought to look good against, but now you're gonna have a problem as you go into SEC play. I don't know what to think about this Arkansas defense.
I honestly don't either, and I think this week will tell us a little bit about Arkansas's pass rush. Can they make Max Johnson uncomfortable? Can Arkansas find that matchup like a couple of years ago when they won down there? Troy Williams just ate up an inexperienced tackle. Can you find that matchup that maybe you can, take advantage of and create some havoc that way? Maybe you get your linebackers involved in some blitzes, and Pooh Paul doesn't have a problem trying to fly into the backfield and get after a quarterback. I don't think Jaheim Thomas would either. Maybe you get Snacks Johnson, coming off the edge from his nickel spot. I don't know. I just think you got to throw things at Max Johnson that make him uncomfortable. You can't just let him sit back there and, just kind of survey the field and make him feel like he can do whatever he wants. But I think Arkansas's secondary, I think, is maybe what has me the most pessimistic about this game.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, I think I may have said this on the Tuesday podcast, but Jaheim Singletary got picked on a lot at LSU. He gave up 5 catches on 6 targets for 140 yards and 3 scores. That's just, I don't know that you can play that. Maybe you can this week, because I don't think that Max Johnson is half the quarterback that Jaden Daniels is. So maybe you're less worried about deep balls, but still you got to cover somebody. You got to keep them in front. I think one of my keys this week is Jalen Braxton. He's the highest rated guy in Arkansas's last recruiting class. Played 25 snaps last week, and he had Arkansas's best coverage grade at LSU. I think he was targeted one time, and he had the pass breakup against Malik Neighbors at the goal line on deep ball. So I think that was kind of encouraging for Arkansas staff. And Sam said on Wednesday that he thinks Braxton's going to be a guy that plays a lot this week, and he's so talented, and athletic and fast. I don't think you can keep him off the field, honestly. So I think he'll get his shot to maybe, I don't know if solidify a starting spot is the best way to say it, but make the staff think week after week after week that he may be the guy to roll out there first.
Yeah, going back to Dallas from Frisco, like you said, big time, high rated recruit. Ethan, Texas A&M's defensive front. I think it's one of the more, I don't know if underrated is the right word, but it doesn't maybe get the publicity of some other defensive fronts in the SEC. I think this is a really good group, and I think this is going to give Arkansas a big challenge this week up front. We thought Bo Limmer played a lot better last week against LSU. Brady Latham, not as good in the run game as he was in the pass game. He was Arkansas's highest rated pass pro last week. McKinley Johnson is a big defensive tackle who I think could give Arkansas some problems, 325 pounds there in the middle. And I think that, he's one of those that is going to command a double team, and it's going to put a lot of stress on Arkansas's tackles and how they win one-on-one battles against A&M's edge rushers.
Yeah, and Jackson's kind of due, honestly, for a big game. He kind of had a quiet first 3 weeks and then started to get in a rhythm against Auburn. He didn't have a any tackles for loss before that Auburn game and had a 4-yard sack and almost doubled his tackles on the year. I
Everybody
think
had a tackle for loss against Auburn, right?
yeah,
15 for the
that's
Aggies.
something like that. They were, I mean, I'm not out to say that Auburn's offense is anywhere close to, a well-oiled machine, but I mean, they really, eh, Texas A&M kind of just owned them last weekend. McKinley Jackson's good. They have another guy, Shamar Turner, who he leads them in sacks right now. Um, they have a lot of guys who have tackles for loss. That's, I think, what's so impressive about them is it's not like they have a couple guys that are really just stacking up the TFLs. It's like they have production all around. The thing for A&M is really just the defensive performance against Miami was really disheartening, of course. I mean, if you allow a team to score 48 points and give up 5 touchdowns, you don't know how to feel about the defense at that point. But aside from that game, it's like they've looked really good defensively. Um, I think, yeah, they're second in the SEC right now in total defense. They allow 273 yards a game. They've, aside from that Miami game, I mean, New Mexico scored 10 points, Louisiana Monroe scored 3, and Auburn scored 10. So they've I mean, the defense has done its job in every other game. You know, I think Arkansas really presents the biggest challenge since Miami, though. They're facing an offense that just got done kind of getting in a rhythm down at LSU. And here's something I think that honestly we need to watch for too, though, is you know, I've started getting into these PFF grades a little bit too. They're really interesting to look at. Texas A&M is last in the SEC and one of the worst in the country. Their tackling grade, it's 49.7.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, if you can't tackle well, I mean, good luck with KJ Jefferson.
Yeah.
I think that could be really important this weekend. If they're able to apply a lot of pressure, if they're able to own Arkansas up front and actually bring down KJ, it could be a long day for the Razorbacks. But if Arkansas's offensive line is holding up and KJ's, making plays being hard to take down, I think Arkansas could have a lot of success against Texas A&M's defense.
When you said that, the first thing I thought of was AJ Green's touchdown against them 2 years ago down in Arlington, where he broke, what was it, like 4 or 5 tackles. And the last one was about the worst tackle attempt I've ever seen. He's
Yeah,
running
they
away from the defensive back, and the defensive back, instead of trying to tackle him, just shoves him. And he
he
pushes a
looked like
fast
whenever
guy closer to the end zone.
it looked like he got one of those in Mario Kart, the little mushrooms that give you a
Yeah.
little speed burst. That's what the tackle did for him. It just propelled him into the end zone.
Yeah, I wonder, about some of these speedsters that Arkansas can put out there, whether it be an AJ Green or a Satania, if he, well, I mean, you got to tackle on special teams too. It makes you wonder how they're going to handle some of those more speedy players that Arkansas has on the field. I just feel like if Arkansas can get Rocket Sanders back this week and he's himself, obviously there's going to be some rust there because he hadn't played for 3 weeks. But I'm just talking about physically. If he's 100%, if they get him back, I just feel like that creates such a new element to this Arkansas offense that we probably haven't seen this year, because we know how much they held back in the opener against Western Carolina, and then we haven't seen Sanders since then. It's almost like a two-man basketball game, though, with KJ and Rocket. I mean, those two work off each other so well. I feel like the RPO game with the two of them, they're so in sync. I feel like Rocket gets yards because of how well KJ sees uh, the defense in the RPO game. I feel like KJ's passing game can benefit from the threat of having Rocket in the backfield. This, we talk about, what does Arkansas look like through 4 games and analyzing the offense. I saw something about that this morning. I don't know that you can really analyze Arkansas's offense until you got a healthy KJ with a healthy Rocket. And this might be the first time we see it this weekend, assuming that he gets to play.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, we've mentioned this a lot this year, but just those early downs are really going to be critical for Arkansas. Having Rocket back, assuming he's full go, like if he can get 2 or 3, I mean, 4 yards on the first play, I I think that's just going to be really important in this game. Is to just kind of I that year that Arkansas beat A&M, it felt like they kind of owned the line of scrimmage and were getting those 4 or 5 yard runs consistently. I think that's really important. A&M is actually second in the country in third down defense. They're allowing teams to convert 20% of their third downs. And Arkansas is as bad as the third down conversions looked against BYU. Scotty wrote a really good piece on how good they were on third down against LSU, and they actually rank I think like 33rd in the nation right now and third down conversion percentage, which I think just that BYU performance completely might have distorted the overall third down effort this year. I thought they'd be a lot lower than that, but I think staying ahead of the chains and not getting to third down, clearly A&M's shown that they can get off the field if it gets to that.
Other big keys this week: turnovers, penalties. Obviously, Arkansas's lost the turnover battle the last 2 weeks against BYU and LSU. Penalties, we know how bad Arkansas has been there. I think 25 for 194 yards over the last 2 weeks. And, then there's just the intangibles. We talked the other day about noise and how that affected Arkansas against LSU, not getting the play calls in on time, having to burn timeouts, taking a delay of game once they were out of timeouts. I think all of the pre-snap movement with your offensive linemen down in their stances for so long, I think that affected them. And, Scotty and I made this point the other day that even though it's a neutral site game, the Aggies, they make a lot of noise in Arlington for it being a neutral site game. And so that's something to watch, Scotty.
Yeah, they're kind of like your kids. They just constantly make noise. It's just a little bit of a deeper voice from all those dudes in there. I think another thing is not jumping from the 4-yard line. I think that's big. You just get ball security is just a huge thing, right? Like last year, it's snapping the ball off your butt and kind of knocking yourself out of comfortable field goal range. And when you're down by the goal line, it's trying to make a play on first down, and jumping from well outside your range to make it to the goal line. I think you got to let that play out and then understand that you've got second and third down, potentially fourth down too. Red zone is going to be a big deal this year. I went back and looked. If you go back to the 2021 game that Arkansas won, and then last year, Arkansas's got 1 touchdown in 5 red zone trips in their last 2 games against A&M. So that, getting, having to settle for a field goal or not getting any points at all out of, these red zone trips, that can obviously make a difference in a game that's, typically comes down to a play or two.
And Arkansas hasn't been very good in the red zone the last 2 weeks, settling for field goals a lot. They've scored just 4 touchdowns in 9 red zone trips against BYU and LSU. The Whole Hog Football Podcast is sponsored by Kendall King Design, Displays, Signage, KendallKing.com. That's KendallKing.com.
The Kendall King Group family of companies plays to win, just like our hogs. We know how demanding retail marketing is today. From digital omnichannel creative services, through in-store signing and displays, and finally to social influence, we've got you covered. Our KKG Inc. family of companies, Kendall King, Shopcart Creative, and Soapbox Influence are winning with multiple retailers and brands. We play to win and will be a winning partner for all your retail marketing service needs. Go Hogs!
First time this year that we'll have all SEC versus SEC games, 7 games where SEC teams are playing other SEC teams this weekend. It starts Florida at Kentucky on ESPN. It's 11 a.m. kickoff, Scotty.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to take Kentucky because they're home. I know that Kentucky's had not great luck whatsoever in that series, but I'm not sold on Florida just yet. And I just kind of like Kentucky at home. That's kind of a weirdly tough place to play.
Yeah, I owe Kentucky one after for zero reason at all picking Vandy last week. I don't know why I did that, but I'm sold on Florida's defense, still not really their offense. I think Kentucky's got a pretty nice defense. They always do, it seems like. So I'll take Kentucky at home as well.
I think Kentucky. I think Kentucky beats Florida on Saturday night. Kentucky, they're good defensively. I like them because they're good defensively. 2:30 game on CBS. Georgia goes to Auburn. This is usually a late season game. It's early in the year this year, and Auburn, they have to play a pretty feisty bunch after losing last week.
I like Georgia. I would like Georgia if Auburn had its quarterback situation figured out too. Like last week, I think they played 3 guys against A&M. I would imagine that Georgia is probably going to be kind of a slow burn blowout. I would imagine. I think Georgia's had some trouble getting off to quick starts, but I think second half it'll be Georgia in a runaway.
Yeah, I don't think Auburn has its offense figured out at all. where it needs to be going and playing Georgia. I like Georgia to kind of, like Scotty said, just kind of have a big win by the end, but kind of a slow burn to get there.
Georgia's the new Alabama. I've always said, don't pick against Alabama. Don't pick against Georgia. Maybe if Georgia plays Alabama, you got to pick between one of them. But otherwise, Georgia, it's an easy pick here. Missouri goes to Vanderbilt. It's a 3:00 kickoff on SEC Network. Maybe a trap game for the Tigers. Everybody's saying they're undefeated. They're being talked about as a potential, I don't know, dark horse candidate for something. I feel like they're overrated.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you too. I'm not sure about the whole 23rd in the country thing, but I think they're talented enough to go win at Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt will give them a game. I think I've said this on previous podcasts. Vandy's got a couple receivers that can go ball. But I like Missouri in that game though.
I'm done picking Vandy for anything, so I'm picking Missouri out of spite. I'm picking Missouri by a couple touchdowns.
I'd like to pick Vanderbilt in the upset here, but their defense just gives me so much concern. And I think Brady Cook's pretty good quarterback from Missouri. So I think Missouri will go to Nashville and win that game, and their fairy tale will continue on for another week. LSU goes to Ole Miss. It's the only top 25 versus top 25 matchup in the SEC this weekend. It'll be a 5:00 kickoff on ESPN.
LSU's got a good offense. Ole Miss, I don't think plays defense that much, so I'm going with Jaden Daniels. That what I saw last week from Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and just all the weapons that they have, man, they're so talented. I'm not sure that Ole Miss, kind of like Arkansas, will be able to find enough stops to win, even at home.
Yeah, I think you'll see the second half of Arkansas LSU for almost the whole game for LSU against Ole Miss. I just think they'll have big play after big play. I do think that Ole Miss was held to 10 points against Alabama because they're playing Alabama, who's got a great defense. So I think they'll have a little more success on offense. So I like a lot of points, but I also like LSU to win by a couple scores.
I like LSU to win because I think LSU is going to get back into the national conversation by the end of the year. They lost to a really good Florida State team at the start of the season. I think that they've got a lot of focus right now because of that loss. I think they go into Oxford and win Saturday night. 6:30 kickoff on SEC Network. South Carolina goes to Tennessee. This is the revenge game for the Vols after they lost to the Gamecocks, and that ended their championship aspirations a year ago.
Yeah, I'm going to be real honest. I have no idea about this game, but I'll give I'm anti Shane Beamer at the moment, even though Spencer Rattler's really good, man. I think I've been kind of sleeping on him a little bit, but Dow Loggins is doing some good work with him. I think he's playing pretty well. I'm just not sure it'll be good enough to beat Tennessee on the road. That'll probably be a really tough crowd to play in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a believer in Spencer Rattler and the Xavier Legette connection. They look real dialed in almost every game, but I don't think that they're going to go into Tennessee and shock them for a second straight year. I just can't see it happening. That's why I'm picking Tennessee in this one.
I think South Carolina's walking into a buzzsaw at Neyland Saturday night. I think Tennessee wins big. And I think that they've had this game circled on their calendar ever since they lost over there last November. So I'll go with the Vols. Not a believer, Scotty?
Negative.
8:00 kickoff Saturday night. Alabama goes to Mississippi State. It's on ESPN.
I think this might be the week that Alabama puts a hurt on somebody, and I just kind of hate it for Mississippi State. That I think they're going to be that team that gets beat down.
Yeah, I think it's 2 straight weeks of Alabama beating up on a Mississippi team. I think this one gets pretty ugly.
Yeah, I think Alabama beats Mississippi State. I've said this a time or two on our podcast. I'm not a believer in Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. I just don't think that's going to go well there. I think it's going to be a short-lived tenure for him at Mississippi State, and I think Alabama goes in there and probably lays it on them pretty good. That's always a game where Alabama brings a lot of people. It's like 90 miles from Tuscaloosa to Starkville, and you got a lot of Alabama fans, in the middle, and they really go over to Starkville and have a good showing. I just think Alabama wins that one. Kind of like LSU. I think that, that early season loss got Alabama focused. They had the tough game against South Florida. I think they're on track right now to do well for a few weeks. And then finally, A&M against Arkansas, 11 o'clock kickoff. Is going to be on SEC Network for the first time, at least in Arlington. The Razorbacks are a slight underdog in this game. Scotty, how do you think it goes?
I sent Chip my prediction late last night, and I've got Arkansas outright. I think KJ kind of maybe exercises some demons, so to speak, from last year's game, and I think he's starting to get more and more confidence in the skill guys around him. I think Arkansas's offense has a nice day.
Yeah, it's a weird 3-week stretch for Arkansas playing, LSU, A&M, and Ole Miss, all 3 series that have had some just wild games in recent history that can go either way. I think Arkansas gets it done this year, though. I just think with the uncertainty of having a backup quarterback coming in, I think Arkansas started to figure out some things offensively against LSU. I just think this is the type of game they win.
Wow, all 3 of us going with Arkansas. I've got Arkansas, and people may look at us, oh, you're being homerish. I don't think that's the case. I think we've all been pretty critical of the Razorbacks' play here over the past couple of weeks. I think it's KJ Jefferson is the difference in this game. Number one, I think he's had to live with that loss to Texas A&M last year for an entire year. I think it's something where he goes out and he's motivated to play well against A&M. I think he showed last week why everyone thinks so highly of him as a quarterback, to be able to go into Death Valley and throw punches with Jaden Daniels in the third and the fourth quarter and really give Arkansas a chance to win. It's not that KJ Jefferson didn't do enough to lead Arkansas to a win last week. It's that Arkansas's defense couldn't get him the ball back in order to give the Razorbacks a lead in the second half. LSU gets the ball with 5:06 left and basically gives Arkansas no time to have anything to score at the end of the game. Just a Hail Mary attempt right there at the very end from probably a little bit farther than KJ's arm will reach the end zone. I think he has a big game against Texas A&M on Saturday. I think the potential return of Rocket Sanders is really a boon for Arkansas, because I think KJ and Rocket play really well off of one another. So I got Arkansas winning this game. I'm still a little leery of Arkansas's defense. I could see A&M hitting some big plays against Arkansas's defense. But I just think that in this series, number one, Arkansas is due for some wins. They've lost to A&M so many times over the last several years. And I think that, they showed it against LSU last week, that there's some fight left in this team. So I got Arkansas to beat A&M, maybe totally wrong, but that's going to be my pick, and I'm going to stick to it. Again, Arkansas and A&M on Saturday morning is an 11 o'clock kickoff on SEC Network. Hope you'll come to our site this weekend, wholehogsports.com, to read all of our coverage. We're going to have several reporters there in Arlington covering the game, and we'll have plenty at wholehogsports.com afterward. We'll be back with another Whole Hog Football podcast early next week to look back at Arkansas, Texas A&M, and start to take a little bit of a look ahead to the Arkansas Ole Miss game the week after. For Scotty Bordelon and Ethan Westerman, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Whole Hog Football Podcast.
The proceeding has been a production of the Hog Sports Network. Look for our daily podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. For more Razorbacks coverage, go to wholehogsports.com or follow the Hog Sports Network reporters on social media.